So we talk a lot about the power of content as an asset for sales, for B2B, for marketing, and how the two work together. But how do you embrace content? Think about your buyer's perspective. It's thought that a consumer consumes at least 5 pieces of content before they make an engagement with you face-to-face or on the phone. It's thought that buyers take independent research. If it takes 5 to 12 contacts to make a sale, touch point, and 77% of people say they do independent research, all of this points back to content as a vital asset in what you do in your day-to-day, the ownership of it. But what is content? I'm delighted, absolutely over the moon, to be joined today by ultimately one of the world's leading voices on the power of content as an asset for B2B, for marketing, and for sales. Joe Pulizzi, you've written one of the must-read books around content marketing. I have it, and I absolutely do support that. It's a brilliant book for those wanting to get into it. The second edition is about to come out. But for the listeners, for the viewers, give us an introduction about who you are, where have you come from, what the heck do you do anyway?
Rob, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Geez, where to start? I've been doing this content marketing thing for almost 25 years now. Before it was called content marketing, I was doing content marketing. I started in B2B publishing and then fell into this idea of, okay, well, we don't have to interrupt our customers to actually have them buy more stuff. And I said, oh, we could actually build an audience. And this is sort of a pre-customer database. And how do we build that audience? We deliver valuable, relevant, compelling information on a consistent basis to a group of people. They begin to trust us, like you said, 5, 6, 7 pieces. Once they start to trust you, you can sell anything you want. And I said, wow, I like this. I like this model of marketing. I think it's the purest form of marketing. And there's lots of different ways that you can get new customers and grow your revenues and profits and all those types of things. But if there's one that I think is the best way to go to market, I absolutely would put content marketing on the list. So I've been teaching about this for the past, as I said, 25 years. I've written 8 books. The most recent one is Epic Content Marketing. I started Content Marketing Institute back in 2007 and now run an organization called The Tilt and an event called Creator Economy Expo, which is for individual content creators. But I've been living in this, hey, if you're a marketer or sales or marketing person at a large organization, what's your content marketing playbook? And then if you're an individual and you want to start your own business, how does that work? So that's what I've been doing for my entire career. And I think it's the best business model on the planet. So I'm actually going to put it out there and try to convince anyone listening to this that, that they should be doing more of it.
What makes you say that's the best business model on the planet? Why is content so fascinating to you? Why is it so relevant in today's age?
If you were starting a business today, let's just say I'm going out there and I got some kind of widget product out there. It makes more sense to me to actually build an audience first that wants to get your information, and then because it's less risky, there's not the upfront manufacturing costs for putting up something out there. And then once you build that audience, like I said before, a pre-customer database, they already trust you. Then you insert the products, whatever product you have. I mean, if you're a content creator out there, you monetize 6, 7 different ways. You sell consulting and books and advertising and events and subscriptions, and all those things work really, really well. On the same side, it goes for marketing. I mean, if you're like, okay, well, how are we going to go to market today? Let's just push the product and service messaging out there in as many ways as we can. Yeah, that'll work. And it's very difficult to do that. And it takes a lot of money to get to that point. If you're going to, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, that's how we started. And if this was 1975, that's exactly what you should do. You should just go and find out where your audience is at in those few spots in a magazine or television and just inundate them with messaging. Well, today we have the opportunity, especially in business to business, to say, okay, who's that target persona? Who's that audience that we're targeting? What are their pain points? What are their needs? Let's target those needs as it relates to the thing we actually want to sell. And once we build that audience, that could be a blog, it could be a newsletter series, it could be a podcast, it could be a YouTube series, it could be even TikTok for B2B. We've seen lots of those out there. So whatever that is, you build that audience. And then once you're a trusted expert, thought leader, whatever you want to call it, well, isn't that what we're trying to do as salespeople? And every salesperson that's watching this, listening to this right now knows that it's easier to sell if the person trusts you. Done. That's all we're doing. And it's very hard to build trust today. But if we do that by we're the thing. Like, let's say that they get up in the morning and they have a problem in their business, and you're the email newsletter that they receive, or they go to LinkedIn and you're the message that they really needed that day. And you know what? If you do that consistently over a long period of time, you will be a better salesperson, a better marketer. You'll sell more stuff. The challenge is you have to be consistent. You have to be original. You have to have a point of view, and it takes time. And yes, there is some fear to getting out there and saying, by distributing any piece of content, you're saying you're an expert, or you're trying to be yes, put yourself out there. Anyone that starts a content business, by the way, their number one fear for starting it is just fear. It's like, I don't want to put myself out there. What if it doesn't work? What if I look like an idiot? Well, you know what? Everybody feels that way. Get over yourself and focus on the needs of your customers. If you focus on the needs of your customers and you solve that, not with your product, but with information, I think that's the best you could do for your career.
That is, yeah, and I've just been scribbling some notes here. I've been listening away there, Joe. I think one of the things we try to put across to the businesses that we work with is not everyone is your customer, but the messaging that professionals seem to use is that they see LinkedIn, as an example, as a stage to almost shout at more people. I can shout at more people and amplify my message, which talks actually to no one, because I've tried to please everyone. And it doesn't address what you mentioned, pain points, because we try and just shout to everybody. And one of the things we try to put across is that we have to sell how our buyers want to buy and not how we are used to selling. And I think that challenges that comfort zone space. So what do you say about those that do have fear? Because they are legitimate fears, I guess, holding people back. Is there a consistency? You mentioned it takes time. All these things are probably not what the CEO, the MD wants to hear. They want results, and they want results now. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take a buy-in, and therefore all these are reasons also not to do something. So is there case studies or insights around the impact that content has that can help overcome those fears?
First of all, to get rid of that fear, you need to simplify the process, and we know what works in this. By the way, if you look at any B2B buying sales cycle, it's months, sometimes years. I used to sell multi-million-dollar product in the publishing industry. That was a 9 to 18 month sales cycle. These things take time. If your CEO doesn't understand that you're investing in your communications, you might want to leave. So they would understand this. Anything worth doing is going to take time. So here's to getting over the fear. And this is what we've done in our research. And you look at the great case studies out there. You don't want to just, a lot of business people will come out and say, I got to be everywhere. That's actually not true. You don't want to be everywhere, because you'll end up creating content in a mediocre fashion across many different places, and it's not going to work. Choose one or two places where you can focus on a very niche audience and try to help them. Just real simple, right? So you write down, okay, who's the audience that I'm targeting? And to your point, it should be a very small audience. The smaller, the better, where you can say, can I be a leading source of information for that audience? And if your audience is so wide, it's almost laughable, the answer. That's like, oh, I couldn't do that. But if you get it smaller and smaller and smaller, like for me right now, I'm focusing on this expert-driven content entrepreneur, not just a creator, not just a content creator, somebody that wants to launch a business from an expertise-first manner. Well, I think that's a place that I could be very helpful. So I'm going to focus on that. And I'm going to do so in a very simple way. So I'm not going to say, oh, I got to be on Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram and email newsletters and podcasts. No, what you want to do is actually focus on one. So you take this niche and you find what we call a content tilt. What's your area of differentiation that you feel you can cut through all the clutter? What's your take? Do you have a point of view? Okay, great. You have to be different in some way. If you're just sharing what everybody else is sharing, that's a problem. So find that point of view to that persona that you're targeting, that small niche, and then do one thing really well. Is that getting up every day and you're delivering a message to them on LinkedIn? Is that an email newsletter sent every week to this group of people? And when I say group of people, If like, I know some salespeople that send to 20 or 50 people or 100. It's okay. I mean, because if you're selling multi-million-dollar products and services, it only takes one.
Yeah.
It only takes one. Or if you have a small list, I mean, when I started, I had a couple hundred on the list. Now we've got thousands and thousands, but that happens over a 3, 4, 5 year time period. So that's where I would say, okay, put your fear aside and just say, let's just start by doing one thing, and know that if you're going to do it, you've got to commit to it for 9 to 12 to 18 months. Because if somebody comes to me, Robin, they'll say, Joe, I like to do this content marketing thing. I've got 6 months. What should I expect? And I say, you should expect nothing. Expect absolutely nothing in 6 months, because if you expect to become the trusted expert in 6 months, you're fooling yourself. It takes a long time to build an audience. The shortest I've seen a business make it is 9 months in this area. It generally takes 18 to 24. So again, don't stop the other ways that you're selling. But on the side here, let's start this project and say, how can we truly be instrumental in our customers' lives without the product we sell? So replace that with information. Do one thing really well: the newsletter, the podcast, the YouTube. Consistently deliver over a long period of time. And I guarantee you in 18 to 24 months, you're going to come back and say, wow, this has completely changed our organization. We invested by helping our customers. That's all we're doing. It's all we're doing.
And it shouldn't be anything new, should it? This is what we've been helping customers do for years, forever. It's just a new way of doing it. And I think one thing that struck me there, Joe, they see results. The shortest you've seen results is 9 months. What do these companies see as a result? What is a positive outcome from an effective content strategy? What should businesses be looking for as success?
Well, first of all, this is marketing. We should have a marketing goal. So you want to create a hypothesis about what that goal would be. So what is it? Do you want to create more sales from current customers? Create better yield? Do you want more loyalty and retention? Is this a new prospecting type tool where you're going after new customers that don't know you at all? Now, by the way, if you're looking for I don't want to say easiest, because none of this is necessarily easy, because it takes a while to do it, but you should start in loyalty retention land is generally the place. I mean, if you look at the history of content marketing, and I'm a historian and I'm going to go back to the 1700s when Ben Franklin launched the printing press, and why did he start that whole thing? That was a whole content marketing initiative to sell he wanted to print more books. So he started writing around it so people would see, oh, this is a thing. So start in the land where people know you already, and you're trying to deliver an additional service of loyalty and retention. So that's great. But again, we're changing behavior. So what is it you're trying to do? Put that out there. And then you can figure out what makes the most sense. So if you're starting with loyalty, you already have their emails. You might go out to them and say, hey, we're launching a new email newsletter. We'd love you to subscribe to this thing. Or maybe it's on the new prospect side. So this is really, you're focusing on LinkedIn and maybe a blog so people can find you in search engine optimization or whatever the case is. So start there and then look at the numbers. At the end of the day, the best place to measure is if you build a proprietary audience. Let's say that you're doing an email newsletter. By the way, email newsletters are all the rage. And I don't know about what you're seeing, Rob, but on the B2B side, you're seeing lots of email newsletters. It's great because you have control over that, unlike other social platforms where you have an addressable audience. You can do something with your email audience. The opportunity is that even though a lot of people are doing email newsletters, most of them are terrible. So you can come in and say, I'm going to deliver something through opt-in email. You're not going to follow GDPR. You're going to do all the right things, and you're going to deliver something special to them on a consistent basis. And when you get those opt-in names, they say, yes, I want to receive this. Measure that on your customer database between those that are getting your things, that receive your content, and those that don't. I'll give you a really good example. This is a consumer example, but it comes to my mind. TD Ameritrade. They sell financial products, trading products for people that trade all day long. And they created a magazine called Think Money Magazine years ago. They didn't know what it was doing. And they took them 2 years to get this data. And they found out that those traders that opted in to receive this publication and were reading it ended up trading 5 times more than those that didn't. So that's what we're talking about. When people receive your information, what are they doing differently? And you can measure those things if you set the hypothesis up front. So and really no matter if you start on LinkedIn or a podcast or any social media platform, at the end of the day, especially on the B2B side, we want to end up our home in email, because then you can pipe it in against your CRM database, marketing automation. You could do lots of fun things to say, oh, and we do know, you said 5, I would say 7. Take 7 really good touches for somebody on the business to business side with their content before they're ready to make a buying decision and they pull the trigger on a purchase. So look at that from an email newsletter standpoint. You send out, they open 7, 9, 12 of these, they're much more likely to buy than they would have been if you hadn't done this.
And this, for me, Joe, is one of the stumbling blocks that people mistake, or don't mistake, they just confuse perhaps a contact. They think it has to be 5 to 7 phone calls, face-to-face visits, because that's what we like to do. But it doesn't take too much to challenge that and say, well, how do you buy things? Well, I research, I look at reviews, I like that email, I like their tone of voice. When did you meet them? I've never met them in my life. So we can see it through our consumer side when we're buying things that this happens, but we seem to get a fog, especially in a B2B sense. When they have to do it at work, well, we don't do things like that around here. So I really like what you're saying about you have to create the hypothesis, the reason, if you like, the North Star, whatever you want to call it, about what we're trying to achieve. How do you encourage people to even start that? Because it can get a bit overwhelming. And I've wrote your process for the tilt, and it might just be worthwhile and beneficial to the listeners around identify your sweet spot. You've mentioned the content tilt, then into building the base. Would you mind just introducing that as a concept? Because it might help people start. Because sometimes it's overwhelm that prevents, and I just think it might help to.
Yeah, it's a couple week process you can go through. It's a lot of thinking and brainstorming, but basically you start with your sweet spot, which is, okay, well, first of all, who's your audience you're targeting? You want to get that down, as we talked about, to as small a point as you can. Whether you're a salesperson and you have a target audience, or whether you're a marketing person, you have a little bit bigger audience persona you're trying to target. So who's the audience? And from that, what are their pain points? What keeps them up at night? List those things. And on the other side, what's your expertise area? What are the things that you have expertise and knowledge in as an organization or as an individual, depending on how you're coming at it? And then you bring that together into that thing we call the content tilt. And you figure out from those 2 things, that's your sweet spot. Okay, like what makes the most sense that I'm going to target on? And then you say, okay, well, how I'm going to focus on cloud computing in financial services, in business financial services. Okay, how am I going to approach that differently? Am I going to do it through a sense of humor? Am I going to do it because I'm targeting an audience that's not normally targeted with this thing? Am I going to do it because nobody's doing a podcast on this, through a platform? Is it nobody's doing the email newsletter or a print magazine or whatever it is? There's lots of different ways to differentiate it. We don't have to go into all of them, but figure out what that differentiation area is. And then that third step is, okay, now we're trying to build that audience. And you do so very simply. That simple model is you focus on that one audience with one content type. And this is where you can take some of that fear off and just say, what are you good at? Like, what makes sense for you in your organization? Do you have a lot of video people? Do you have a face for podcasting? I mean, like, what is it? What makes the most sense? So you can say, okay, is it audio? Is it video? Or is it textual plus image? So you've got those 3 to start with. And then you say, what's my home base? Is it my email newsletter? Is it LinkedIn? Is it YouTube? You just focus on that home, and that's where you want to build that audience. And then you deliver consistently. And when I say consistently, I mean, if you're doing an email newsletter, you deliver every Friday, like we do it. We started the Tilt, our content creator newsletter, back in April 2001. And since then, we've sent an email newsletter out at 7 a.m. Eastern time every Tuesday and every Friday, and we haven't missed a day. And we've gone from 0 to, I think we've got 22 or 23,000 subscribers right now. How do we do that? This process I just talked. Yeah. And that's the thing is, and I've been in this business a long time, but we were starting a new company, and it's tempting to say, I want to do all the things. I want to do the video. I want to get out there and do a webinar series. But you have to say, oh, no. We're going to do one thing really well, because we don't want to spread it out too much, because we'll become mediocre and it's not going to do good for anybody. So we just focused on our newsletter as our home base. And now, I mean, if you want to know the benefits, I'm a salesperson. It's really easy for me to sell when people reach out to me and say, Joe, I know you've got this event coming up, Creator Economy Expo. Are there sponsorships available? Well, how does that, isn't that better than cold calling? These are the types of things that happen because they've been receiving my information through our email newsletter, see me on LinkedIn. And so get the book. They've been buying, they're like, okay, Joe, I believe in this thing. I like your audience. Is there a way that we can work with each other? That's what this can do, because if you do this right, you will never have to cold call again, ever. Your prospect, your customers will show themselves and say, hey, Joe, I'm ready to buy. Like we'll have 400 or 500 people at our event this year in May in Cleveland. I probably will talk to 10% of those people. The other 90%, I won't know. And then I'll realize once we do the research and go through our system and automation system, I'll say, oh, okay, I see it. They came from this site through an article that we had on, let's say, Google. They signed up for our email newsletter. Oh, there they signed up. They downloaded our research. They opened 80% of the next newsletters. They clicked on this and they're going to the event. And that happened over a 6 to 9 month period. So it's just amazing what can happen, but you have to do that simple part first. And and if you say, Rob, is like, well, okay, why doesn't it work? Almost to a T, the reason why it doesn't work is somebody stopped. Somebody went 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and they gave up. They didn't deliver consistently. They got impatient. They didn't feel it was working, because you have to get through that desert of 6 to 9 to 12 months where you will doubt yourself and you'll say, this isn't working, but that's you just building the expertise. You're building your library of expertise and content so that you get to that point in the 12, 15 month, 18 month where you're like, oh my God, yeah, look at all this expertise and look at this audience we're building. And now we can show that we do know what we're doing.
It's fascinating listening, because I think what you're doing here is helping almost dispel a few myths that, one, it's a silver bullet, two, it's quick. But I think what you're also enforcing is it's easy to a point. The concept is easy. Creating content yourself can be simple using just your smartphone, if that's the space you want to go. So I think what we're doing is breaking down quite a few barriers. And there's something I've scribbled down a couple of times here. You talk about consistency, and I've put underneath it versus frequency. Is there a guide that you can help people refer back to here, or a framework to check, or a process to follow between consistency and frequency? Do we have to post 3 times on LinkedIn every single day? Or is it, I want to get known for this and it's going to be that once a month, whatever it is? Is there a tipping point, a pivot on that? Where are you at with consistency?
Yeah. So when you do the work, you want to look at, actually, we don't want to create a ton of content. You actually want to create the minimum amount of content for the maximum amount of results. So if you look at this whole thing and say, okay, I want to be an expert in this area, you really want to figure out and say, okay, well, what do I have to do with the resources you have? Let's say you're really busy and you say, I can commit to 5 hours a week or 2 hours a week or whatever. What can you do consistently that really will make a difference in your customers' lives? And you might say, I'm looking at all the resources I have inside the company or personally, maybe it's just you yourself. And you say, okay, I can do an amazing email newsletter to my customers every 2 weeks. And if I push that to 1 week, I don't think it would have the quality it needs. So, okay, 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. So that, you can deliver consistently, and that ends up being the frequency. Now, does that mean that you won't post every other day on LinkedIn something to market? I mean, your home base would be your email newsletter, let's say. But yeah, you can still do things inconsistently on occasion on Twitter and LinkedIn as hey, I'm building this, I'm experimenting, I'm trying this out. But the thing that's yours, in this case, we're talking about the email newsletter or the podcast. Like, I've got a podcast, Content Inc. I've had it since 2015. 384 episodes every Monday for for 8 years. I've been doing this thing. Now you set the schedule so you could do that. I don't have the bandwidth to do it daily. Could a daily be more effective if it was truly valuable? Sure it would. I have the bandwidth to do 5 minutes every Monday, and I've kept that schedule, and it's helped build the business. So ask yourself a question: how can you be great, and what's the minimum? So, okay, well, I can be great on a 2-week, or I can be great monthly. I have a friend, Andy Crestodina from Orbit Media. He used to be all over the place with his blog posts, and he talked about B2B marketing. And he's like, I was doing a post this 1 week, and then I would take a couple weeks off, and then I realized I wasn't dedicated to it. He said, I can be amazing once a month. So his blog post is 2,000, 2,500 words, based in research, really amazing. But that one blog post a month drives so much business for him. He's been doing it for a long time now, but realize that, hey, I've got to be consistent, because it's just like the newspaper of the days. I used to get the morning paper, and when that morning paper didn't show up one Sunday, I was like, oh, well, maybe I don't need the maybe I don't need the
They're not
paper.
bothered.
So when you don't
Yeah.
show up, they'll look somewhere else. So
Yeah.
you have that audience, and once you stop that consistency, you might never get that audience back. So that's why we want to make sure we're consistent at all times.
I like to always frame it as well in the companies that are more traditional in their habits. If we said to them, this is going to help you get better results in 9 months, but it's called a telephone, they'd say, make more calls, do more calls consistently. But because it's a thing that they don't necessarily understand yet, they'll try it once. They'll say, we tried that, but it doesn't work. I told you it's different in our industry. And I just think that consistency, and you're right. Have you got the capacity to make 15 calls a day? Yes. Then you'll do that every day for the next 5 years or whatever. But you challenge that same concept around something like content, they're consistently shying away from it. And I think I made a note there. What's the best you can do with the resources that you have? I think that's a real good takeaway, because everyone expects massive and immediate results, but they put in this much time.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore they're expecting a disproportionate and unfair advantage from the effort that they're going to put in. It takes effort, as you said. It takes time, as you've said.
A really good example, and this is from the consumer side, but this could be any company. So most people know Red Bull.
Mm-hmm.
They have a content production studio called Red Bull Media House. It could be worth as much as the energy drink itself. It's so valuable. And you say, okay, well, they do thousands of videos, and they're doing music now, and they've got a magazine, and they've got all the things. If you go to Red Bull Media House, you're like, oh my God, they're a media company. They're doing content. Well, how did Red Bull start? Red Bull started as a print magazine that they gave away at Formula One races. That was it. And they did that for like a year or 2 years until they figured out, okay, this is our, well, a couple of years later, they created Red Bulletin magazine. That's about 2007. That's all they did. They said, okay, we're going to do this really well. Did that, and then now they've got 2 million subscribers to Red Bulletin magazine, and they're doing all the other things. Now, could they have started by doing all the things? No, absolutely couldn't happen. That's any media company. Look at Financial Times. Look at Huffington Post. They all start with one thing, doing one thing really well and very simple over a long period of time. And then once they do that really well and build an audience, then they go do the other things. So it's just, and by the way, you talked about like inside a company and the fear of content. Companies do more of content creation than anything else. I mean, literally look at all the content that's being generated in the organization. All we're saying is put a little strategy behind it. You're creating all kinds of content already. Just say no to a lot of things that you're doing so you can say a big yes to these one or two things that you're doing really well. And if you focus on your customer and their needs and just say, we don't have to sell against this right now. Let's just focus on this being an amazing resource for our customers. It'll sell in the future. But right now, if you just focus on, oh, we're just giving this for you. And when you focus on the audience, then you don't want to get in the pitch, and you're not, these emails don't become sales emails.
Yeah.
They become really important pieces of information.
Yeah. And I think what you're highlighting here is something that we see so often, and you probably see it in the organizations you speak to too. There is a huge detachment between sales and marketing. Sales go about their business. Marketing, create brochures. I just think if an organization could grow up a little bit and modernize itself, Wouldn't it be nice to see marketing speak to sales and say, what do your customers say to you? What is it they're saying and what do they need answering? We can do it for you. And it just answers a whole load of the
That's right.
creation side. And for me, it would join up marketing and sales. Do you see that play out in businesses that you speak to? Is that an observation that you have?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, as much as we've talked about sales and marketing integration, we probably had not had it and not not seen it. And I've seen in a lot of large B2B companies where you have marketing creating all these sales pieces that sales don't use. I've seen it to where some of the number one, number two reps actually hire their own agencies just for them, which is amazing.
Wow.
It's like, okay, well, you have a marketing department. They hire, if they're selling millions and millions of dollars of product, they don't trust marketing. They're going to say, I'm going to hire my own. It's really disaster because we're seeing that disconnect. And I think both sides need to reach out a little bit. Sales needs to say, this was what I need. Here's where my readers are falling, or my audience is falling down. My customers are falling down. Here's what I could need to do a better job. And marketers should be setting up listening posts. Number one thing. I mean, when I started in publishing, our whole thing was we had to set up listening posts so we understood the needs of the reader. And that means we were calling the readers up. Hey, what are you struggling with? What's going on? What can we help more with the content? And now today you can focus on, hey, what are our customers saying on LinkedIn? What are they tweeting about? What are they sharing on discussion forums? What are sales saying? What's customer service saying?
Oof.
Get all that information so that we can come back and say, because you have all the data you need, most likely as an organization, you're just not using it. So go ahead and take all that and say, oh my God, look at all this customer insight. You know who would want to know about this? Our customers. Let's give it back to them and start with something very simple. So what I would recommend, Xerox does this really well, where they'll create all sorts of content during the week for marketing, but they send an email to their salespeople every week and say, here's the 3 things that we created this week. I know there's 1,000 things in the intranet. Here's 3 things that we think is going to help do your job better. And then they actually want feedback as well. Did this help? Does this make sense? Because salespeople aren't going to check the forums all the time or the Slack channel. What's new, whatever. I'm out here selling, I'm making calls. So marketing can work a little bit better and sometimes a simple email is all it takes.
It's just such a simple thing of communication, isn't it? What do you want us to create for you? I think here's the top 3 things. Will it help you? Just that question rather than here's a brochure, go and distribute it. No one wants to see a brochure. They want to see insights that will help themselves, answer my questions, my issues. I just wish we could see more of that alignment, and it will happen because people like yourself are fighting the good fight. And I think
the one thing I would recommend too on a marketing side, I know we're talking to salespeople too, but if you're a marketer, go on sales calls. Like go on some sales calls with your salespeople, or when I was started in the publishing and editorial side and the marketing side, the best thing I did was go on sales calls. So I would go out on the road and I would listen firsthand to the problems of the customer. And I was a better writer and a better marketer because of it. So, and then if you're on the sales side, go down and call up or get on a Zoom call or whatever it takes with the marketing people and figure out what are they working on. Because maybe they could use your help, or maybe you don't understand necessarily the pain points that they're digging up.
Yeah,
it would really help if you create some kind, and I'd like to say it's formal, like you could get the whole organization doing this, but if you're an individual and you're like, oh, my company doesn't work that way, well, you do it then.
Yeah,
you make the
space.
call, you go on the call, you can do these things yourself.
I think that's a great takeaway, Joe. And I think I'm just conscious of your time. So what I'd like to do is just reference the book as well, because it's one of my definitely top 2, 3 content books. Content Inc. before it, then there's Epic Content Marketing version 1, which I think the Red Bull story was lifted from. It's a great case study about how
I talk
content
about that quite a bit.
Can build. But there's a second edition, Joe. And what's new here? What's the future of content, and is it addressed in the book? Tell us about
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah. Thank you. Epic Content Marketing, second edition just came out. Really proud of it. Co-wrote it with my friend Brian Piper, and we took okay, here's how you can do a content marketing strategy and build the framework. And we've got the whole thing from A to Z. Like if you want to figure this thing out, whether you're in marketing side or sales side, we will tell you. But then at the same time, all the new channels, looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning, the integration of that. What does it take to build a community in Web3? Where should I put my money? Where shouldn't I? How do I measure this thing in today's day and age? So we really created it as being the textbook for the practice of content marketing. And so far, so good. It seems to be working out that way. But I think if you're a salesperson or on the marketing side, and you don't get this, or you want to actually build this, the book will absolutely help you. And if you need to convince people in your organization, please pass it to them and saying, we should take a little bit of this. And I think that's maybe what I'm most proud of in the book is we don't say, oh, it's all content marketing, because I don't believe that. Content marketing, I like I said in the beginning, I think it's the best way to go, but companies aren't set up this way yet to do this. So how do we take this very old, very new thing called content marketing and integrate it with what's going on in the modern organization? And I think that's what the book does.
Brilliant. And what I love personally about the tone of voice in it is very practical. It's case study led. It's certainly the first version. It's very case study led. It's very practical, hands on. It's not theory. There is stuff you can get stuck into, and I think that's
the biggest difference actually from 13. When I wrote the first edition at 13, a lot of it was theory. But thank you for saying that. This year, it's all, we go through the whole Aero Electronics, and one of the largest B2B electronics companies. We go totally take their model apart and say, here's how they did it, and they purchased some companies and integrated this, and this is how they set it up internally. So to have those case studies this time is just amazing.
Yeah, super. And Joe, for those wanting to find out more before they get their hands on the book, where can we connect with you? How can we find out about your journey, your work? Where's the best place to find you?
Joe Pulizzi, Pulizzi.com. You can get my books, and you can sign up for all my newsletter and all that kind of stuff. But Epic Content Marketing, just wherever they sell books. You mentioned Content Inc. If you're an individual or a small company, I would probably get Content Inc. I think is the better resource. If you work in a company that's larger than 10 people, Epic Content Marketing would probably be the book for you. But yeah, then the organization right now is The Tilt that I founded a few years ago for just content creators. That's thetilt.com. We have a great newsletter that teaches about all this stuff that you and I just talked about. So if you get a chance and want to get that kind of information, that's thetilt.com.
Super. Listen, Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you and speak content with you. It's a real passion of mine, as it is yours, obviously, as well. So listen, thank you for sparing your time. You're a busy man. I really appreciate that. And yeah, we'll speak again soon.
That's a pleasure. Anytime, Rob. I appreciate it.
Take care, Joe. Bye-bye.